We're back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast here on a Friday, a day away from the weekend and 2 days away from the conference championships. And before we get into all of that, talking about the keys, the matchups, and the predictions, ultimately, we got to talk some more about Liam Coen, a very famous name now, I think, for personally, like, a funny reason, because this entire situation is, like, just so unbelievable to me that I think it's pretty funny, but there was a lot of just like confusion, contradicting reports on this story that ultimately ends with Liam Coen making the final decision in leaving his position at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as their offensive coordinator and finally accepting the head coaching role with the Jacksonville Jaguars. An insane chain of events that occurred yesterday and really from Wednesday afternoon all the way to today with Tampa Bay and Jacksonville. And really, to start things off, I guess, to kind of recap everything, the very first thing we heard that connected these two was the initial interest in Liam Coen and the job that he did this past season with the Buccaneers. And that got a lot of people's attentions. In his first year there, he did a very good job with the Buccaneers, with Baker, with some of their young guys like Bucky Irving and Jalen McMillan. So it got a lot of people's attention, one of them being the Jaguars for their head coaching spot. And although we got word that he was taking his name out of consideration and decided to stay in Tampa Bay, it seemed like a couple days ago. And with that decision, the Buccaneers also had a new contract extension coming for him, right? That would have made him one of the highest paid coordinators in the NFL. So at this point, Liam Coen had interviewed with the Jaguars. Then in this downtime, he said, you know what? I'm good, Jacksonville. I think I'm just going to stay with Tampa Bay. And, thanks for the opportunity and things like that, right? That's where I thought this was going. I thought Tampa Bay was able to keep their offensive coordinator, which was going to be great for them. But as soon as that happened, maybe not even a different day, but maybe just later in that day, the Jaguars fired their general manager, Trent Baalke, because we discussed yesterday with that news coming in that it could have been pushing candidates away, right? Because my initial point that I made yesterday on Trent Baalke and that decision by the Jaguars was that, that should have been something they did with Doug Peterson. They should have gotten rid of both of them and not just kept Trent Baalke, especially not Trent Baalke, because a lot of people, executives and people around the NFL, from what I've read, felt like there was a major shock when the Jaguars and their owner, Shad Khan, decided to stick with Trent Baalke. Of both candidates to stick with Trent Baalke, that took a lot of people by surprise because of the success there, or the lack of success in Jacksonville. It took a lot of people off guard, and especially me. I thought both of them were just going to go, and, it got really awkward, too, when you decide to keep Trent Baalke, and during a Zoom meeting with a bunch of media, they asked Shad Khan, the Jaguars owner, if a new head coach wanted a new general manager, would you be willing to move on? And quickly he said yes, whatever the head coach wants. If they want a new general manager, I have no problem with getting a new one, with Trent Baalke in the meeting with him at the same time. He said that right in front of his face. So already that looks like a mess. It looks very weird, and they have a awkward relationship, you would say. And, that already had some warning signs up for me for things in Jacksonville, right? It wasn't anything that I thought anybody would rightly want to be a part of. So it didn't surprise me when Liam Coen said, you know what, I'm good. But then, the Jaguars fire their general manager and they reconnect with Liam Coen just the next day. And then when we thought Jacksonville would pivot to somebody else like Robert Saleh or like Kellen Moore or something like that, we start hearing that yesterday Coen changed his mind, started talking again with the Jaguars right after they fired Trent Baalke, and now he's going to be willing to take their head coaching job. And that was according to ESPN and CBS when that news broke yesterday. And apparently before he signed the extension with Tampa Bay, Coen was contacted by the Jaguars, like I said, with a better offer, and he went to Jacksonville yesterday to close out that deal. And that's where things got a little bit conflicting with the Buccaneers and the Jaguars, I guess you could say, because he went to Jacksonville after, the news of them firing Trent Baalke and reconnecting with Liam Coen about the position and reoffering it to him. He went to Jacksonville despite what some sources are saying, failed efforts from the Buccaneers to contact him yesterday to try and get in some sort of contact with him, get him to, figure out a date for when he could come in and sign that extension. But there was no answer for any contact reach to Liam Coen, and that felt very off. It felt like a little bit shady, if I'm going to be honest. And despite those rumors, though, despite those reports coming from Tampa Bay, there was other reports coming from ESPN that said Liam Coen actually let Todd Bowles know that he was, going to Jacksonville to try and interview and see if he could get this job. So we got two differing parties giving two different sides of their story. And regardless of what the truth is, obviously, right, it feels irrelevant now. But the final decision is obviously that Liam Coen is now officially leaving the Buccaneers after one season there, and he is going to be the new head coach of the Jaguars. So he doesn't have to go too far, I think. I don't know how far Tampa Bay is from Jacksonville, but he's going to stay in the same state and be the new head coach. He's going to take over the responsibilities of developing Trevor Lawrence, which I think is the biggest thing, and working with some of their exciting talent, like Trayvon Walker, I'm forgetting his name, Brian Thomas Jr., and Evan Ingram, and guys like this. They got some solid pieces there that I'm sure the partnership with Liam Coen, now working with Brian Thomas Jr., and especially Trevor, allured the Jaguars to try and get Coen over to be their new head coach. And I love that pairing. I think as a biased party, I guess, in this situation, just giving my thoughts on it, I think it's a great partnership. I think it's a great relationship now for Coen to take over this young and high ceiling offense, I would say, because Trevor Lawrence, again, was drafted number 1 overall, and I think in my time, really following college football, he's one of the most talked about quarterback prospects that I can remember, at least in the last, few years here since, 2021 and things like that. So for him to still cast a good amount of doubt from people, and a lot of people not really being sure on whether or not he could ever actually show his true potential, that's not anywhere near where Trevor Lawrence should be. I think he definitely has a ceiling to be a lot better than what he's shown. But to his defense, you can't do much when now the organization that drafted you is on their 4th head coach. And you want to talk about messing development up, just bring in as many head coaches as the Jaguars have, and you see what you get ultimately with Trevor Lawrence. And not only that, the doubts around his play, but they decide to extend him to a ton of money, which is great for him. Obviously, you're not knocking that, but that's a lot more pressure on the organization to validate that and for them to turn this around as quickly as possible. So it's great for them. It's a great turn of events for them to ultimately end up with their main candidate, right, in Liam Coen. That's who they wanted, and that's who they ended up getting. But it just looks kind of weird. I don't know. If I was the Buccaneers, if I was a Bucs fan, I would be very mad, and it's understandable, right? Because it felt like you did everything from your part as the Buccaneers to kind of give, they gave him the opportunity to go out there and find that new journey, that new opportunity for him to be in an elevated position, and then for him to turn around and say, you know what, I'm going to stay. I think I'm going to keep my role here as the offensive coordinator. So the Bucs think that, all right, we're past that now. We're going to even give him an extension to have him, want to stay here as well, right? Not to get him to change his mind. But that didn't ultimately work, and Liam Coen, then turns around again after Trent Baalke's fired and says, you know what, I am very much considering it, and I'm actually going to accept it. So for the Bucs, you kind of feel like duped and just like, I don't know, it feels like you're just led on, I would say. That's what I would best describe this as. You feel like you've been led down just like a meaningless, path where you end up losing your offensive coordinator anyway. And at the end of the day, I mean, Liam Coen is getting a great opportunity for himself and his individual endeavors, right? Getting this new opportunity, which is great for him, and everybody does have the right, obviously, to back out at the last moment as long as he hasn't signed that extension. I do understand that he can have second thoughts up until that moment that he is there to sign the extension if he decides to do so. But again, I'm trying to fit myself into how I would feel if I was a Bucs fan, and I would feel a pretty negative way about it if that ended up happening, which it did now. So I mean, the Bucs now are going to have to look for a new offensive coordinator, and I mean they've done a pretty good job of it, to be honest. With Dave Canales and his job that he did with Baker, and then him going on to be a head coach. Liam Coen also comes in for a year, and then he's out of there with another great opportunity. So for the Buccaneers and their side of things, I mean, I would say I don't think they're going to have a lot of trouble finding candidates. They just got to make sure they pick the right one, because I do like what the Bucs also have going for them with Baker and a lot of those young guys, like I mentioned. Their offensive line is also looking better, and defensively there are some holes to plug up, but overall this is a team that I think is still growing and getting better with their quarterback, which is exciting. But again, now you got to make sure you pick the right next head coach, right? You don't want to jeopardize that in any which way. So it was a crazy, last couple of days, because I've never seen anything like that, honestly. Usually when they make a decision, it's solidified. There's no back and forth or anything like that. But apart from just being entertaining from a third party coming from myself, just very strange situation that ends up, with another new head coach down there in Jacksonville. So hopefully, they get things in order down there, and we can see Trevor Lawrence reach his full potential now, finally, hopefully, with Liam Coen. But that is enough head coach talk, at least for now. We're going to take a break in it, and when we return, we're going to start previewing the conference championship games. We have the NFC championship game coming up right after this segment. We're going to give our matchups, our keys to the game, any last-minute news, and also our predictions to who's going to win between the Eagles and the Washington Commanders.
Looking